Here we are with another mobile game determined to prove that mobile gamers are real gamers by giving you the same game on your smartphone you'll be able to play on your PC later this year, and by letting you play with your friends on whatever platform, if I understand their intentions correctly. Of course, it's hard to say how that'll work out given that currently the game is in an early alpha for iOS only, and the other platforms, a spread that includes Android, PS4, macOS, and tvOS as well as Windows, are still in an unreleased development state. But I just so happen to be in the early access program on iOS, and I've been giving some time to the game, so here are my early thoughts on Sky. Sky is the next game to come from That Game Company, the makers of Flow, Flower, and Journey for PlayStation. They specialize in highly atmospheric and artistic platformers that are unlike anything else on the market and frankly have the sort of broad appeal that is really difficult to put a finger on. For instance, I first heard of That Game Company at a friend's house when he was introducing me to Bloodborne. After a solid 40 minutes of ribbing me over how terrible I was at Bloodborne, talk turned to other things and he started describing Journey with the sort of fervor normally reserved for religious activities. When it was abundantly clear I couldn't understand what the heck he was talking about, he decided to show it to me instead. So he scrolled to it in his library, past the what's what of mainstream and hardcore games, ranging from Bloodborne and Doom to Battlefield and Uncharted, and started playing. To be clear, absolutely none of the other games in his library were even remotely indie, let alone soothing works of performance art like Journey was. But he adored that game, and within minutes I was in total agreement despite the fact that I share almost none of his gaming preferences. To this day, neither of us is quite sure what it is about Journey, or any of the other That Game Company games, that makes us like them. We just do. That is the company responsible for Sky, and anyone who has played Flower or Journey will absolutely recognize some of what they're seeing. The honest truth is my first impressions of Sky are massively positive, and That Game Company has joined the elite few as one of the most consistently amazing game developers in my book. The art style is visually very similar to Journey, and the way you move about the world feels very similar as well. I'm almost positive that, to a certain extent, that's due to That Game Company being proud of the design in Journey and just wishing they could get it into more hands. They're right to do so, as both games feel more satisfying to control than just about anything else out there. As with Journey, you have a step-leveling flight mechanic that you have to recharge periodically, taking the form of wings instead of scarves this time around, and as with Journey, you explore the familiar yet alien vistas around you looking for strange little stories about the world to expand your abilities. The puzzles are very simple, designed to feel friendly rather than challenging, which means that at least early on progression occurs quickly. Unlocking significant objectives rewards you with a little cutscene depicting some obscure aspect of the world around you without really being specific about anything. Another carryover for Journey is the absolute bare minimum of instruction to get you going. You basically have to just run around experimenting to figure out what to do, and even initial objectives aren't obvious. That's probably the primary reason that the initial progression happens in such short, quick steps. Currently, the main game appears to be maybe 2-3 hours long, if you really take your time hunting all over the candles and gestures. But that leads me nicely into my gripes, of which there are like 2. Touchscreen controls are, as always, the bane of my existence. Controlling your character in Journey feels wonderful. The mobile version of Flower is also great, given that it's basically all handled with the accelerometer in your device. But Sky takes the control scheme of Journey and puts it onto a mobile device, and while the controls really aren't bad for touchscreen controls, they're still touchscreen controls. The grain of salt for this complaint is that I haven't tried using my MFI controller yet. Support might be baked in for that, which would solve this issue. The other complaint is that the game is short. In part, that's because That Game Company kinda just makes short games. All their other titles are very short but highly atmospheric and enjoyable, and maybe it's silly to expect Sky to be different. There is an early look at the sort of seasonal endgame content at the moment, which is encouraging, and the game is also an alpha, so there's no reason they couldn't literally double the content between now and release. But I saved the best for last, because sure, I ran through the main quest pretty quickly, but I wanted to play more because of the multiplayer. When That Game Company does multiplayer, it's very atypical. In Journey, you would just randomly stumble across another player in the middle of your game. You could ignore each other, or help each other through every objective in the entire game, but you didn't become friends on the PlayStation Network or anything like that, you just traveled together. On a journey. It was kind of amazing. Sky is different. You do friend other players, but it's all very opaque. There's also a chat now, but you can communicate all of your in-game intent via gestures if you'd rather. Friends are added on the fly, and groups are created in the moment by simply grabbing hands. And the game becomes infinitely more interesting in that moment. As you can probably see, poor Shell, a nickname I arbitrarily assigned her, got saddled with a mook whose wing was 2 levels below hers. She was dragging me along to places I would not have been able to reach by myself. It honestly felt like I was hanging out with an exceptionally patient big sister, and yes, I did assign a gender to this person. Probably because of the hair. And no, I don't feel bad about it. Because the point here is that my perception of the group and their perception of the group don't have to be the same in order for it to work just fine. Off camera, I had the chance later to pay it forward a little by lifting a level 2 player up to a platform they couldn't get to. Did they see me as a benevolent older brother? Or just some rando they were generally annoyed with? Doesn't matter. I felt helpful, it felt good, and that's what the game was supposed to do. So in the end, I think it's really that sort of easy, opaque, random multiplayer that's going to make this game into something extraordinary. Otherwise, everything feels a lot like Journey, which isn't bad, because Journey is amazing, but you don't get a great game by just copying another game. Sky iterates on an excellent design by adding one of the best random grouping multiplayer schemes I've ever seen, and so it's definitely going to find a place in my library on release. Probably on many platforms. I'm just hoping buying it on iOS will also purchase it on some other devices.